Welcome everybody to your live market update and charts of the day on this Friday morning stroke afternoon, depending on which part of the country you're in. Wherever you are, it's great to see you here. Thank you very much for popping in. And of course, apologies that we didn't run it yesterday. We had to shift it today for a couple of reasons that aren't worth discussing much there. But wherever you are and whoever you are, it's always a pleasure and a privilege to see you here. Let's just pop up this important message just to remind you that this webinar is for educational purposes only. Uh, this means in practical terms to you is you need to do your own due diligence on anything you see here. Make sure you follow trading plans, of course, manage risk on every trading action consistent with your own personal trading objectives and financial situation. That important message being said, let's pop into the headlines for the day. And of course, we start off by looking at what happened overnight in the US. We saw US indices subjected to a broad-based rally with the S&P 500 hitting yet a new record high, just surpassing last week's high again. And this was despite some soft data that came out with the ADP jobs report. Of course, we had that on the weekly jobs last night. Tonight's the biggie, of course, we've got non-farm payrolls. I might run a stream on that. Keep your eyes open just in case that happens. That number's pretty critical. It's not expected to set the world on fire. It's expected around about 75,000 new jobs added, which is really very low. Not only will markets be keeping an eye on that, but any potential downward revision as well. Of course, that caused a great deal of angst last time. And of course, we'll see what impact that has on the chances of more rate cuts after what is priced in already being a September cut and at least one more November or December. US futures are a bit cautious today. We have a slight pickup in the Nasdaq futures, but outside of that, it's pretty flat. Asian markets are generally positive in early trading. The ASX is up around about 0.3%. The Nikkei slightly outperforming. And I think the only major index to the downside is the Shanghai, but that is only just so. European futures are also pointing to a cautiously positive open, but I suspect that what we'll see over the course of the next few hours is a little bit of flattening, maybe even some money coming off the table in preparation for tonight's big data point. US dollar index remains range bound. We'll have a look at charts of all of these in a moment, of course. Gold continues to look really strong. It did pause yesterday at the 3,560 level, which is quite staggering to say that. It's up $130 over the last couple of days. Copper did see some buying early in the week, but it's pulled back a little bit. When oil is slightly softer on a slightly higher build in oil inventories last night and may retest support. Bitcoin is still underneath 112,500 resistance. May well test it during the course of today. Worth keeping an eye on, perhaps. And of course, outside of the NFP, we've got Canadian jobs, UK retail sales, and Germany factory orders. Also due throughout the day. Make sure you check in the timings of those to make sure that you manage risks associated with that appropriately. Okay, let's check in on some charts to follow through on what that means in terms of price action. I'm going to start off with the S&P 500. Here's the futures contract, so you can see that record high last week. You can see it's pushing back up to there on the futures contract. We're over 6,500 at this stage. Really quite staggering. Nasdaq isn't far behind. We are testing again the high from last week. It was quite a nice bounce we had. We'll obviously be watching this level here that we hit back on the 12th of August as the previous record high on the futures contract. So 23,850 is the target. That's a very healthy 150 pips, 150 points up from where we are now. But we may well get a pause in this range until that non-farm payrolls comes out later. But if we do get a burst up above 23,740, it's perhaps worth keeping on your radar. US dollar index, as I said, is trading mid-range. Really hasn't moved much in the last 3 weeks. We'll have a look at individual yen crosses in a moment. But of course, that hasn't deterred gold. As I said, there's that 3560 on this particular futures contract. So looking for a breach of that again. If we look at the shorter time frame, you can see there we've sort of been range bound for the back end of for most of the US session, in fact, and into Asia. So 3560 with a potential next key level at around about 3573 may offer a shorter term opportunity, but again, it may flatten out as markets await that data. We've got copper here that's pulled back, as I said, over the last couple of days after that early buoyancy in the week. So we have got a couple of levels to keep an eye on to the upside. 367 corresponds to where the 200 MA is sitting as well. But just didn't have the impetus to push through there after that big tariff-induced drop we saw at the beginning of August. If we look at the WTI crude oil CFD, you can see weakness over the last couple of days. Again, weak today, although isn't continuing to sell. But this level at this stage of around about $63 is an important one. Let's just take the chart back a little bit. And you can see if we do breach, this is a fairly clean move, potentially down to 60.87. Perhaps worth keeping on your radar. We'll see if it fits your trading plan. And here we have Bitcoin. So we had that test of around about 107,000, and it bounced very nicely off that, back up to what was a previous key level at 112,500. Failure to breach that last week. We give it another shot on Wednesday, but pull back again yesterday. But you can see the buyers aren't going away. Quite happy to keep it just around that, around the top end of this range to see if there's enough momentum to take it through. Again, might be data dependent. If their data does come in soft, it may be that the increased likelihood of more rate cuts could offer a little bit of buying support to Bitcoin. But as always, don't preempt this. Markets respond as markets respond, and often that's not in step with standard logic. So patience, as with all of these key levels, is obviously critical. And of course, making sure that they have those confluence factors that are present in your trading plan. If we look at the US dollar yen, you can see a little bit of weakness in the USD this morning. Some yen strength across most crosses. The pivot level at S1 is possibly of interest at 147.91. Let's call it 148. You can see we tested it multiple times on Wednesday, which also corresponded to the low on Tuesday. So this is looking like an increasingly important level. A little bit of work to do to get down there of around about 13 pips, but possibly a breach of that 147.91, maybe a level of interest. A fairly clean move to the upside when it was going up. So maybe we get the same going down again. But again, I would suspect pre-data we might bimble around this sort of 148 area. Looking at the Euro USD, you can see some buying into the Euro this morning. Let's just pop it on the daily chart for context. So you can see really, if we look at the longer term range, we're about just over mid-range on this. If we take the two key levels at 117.30 and 115.77, you can see we're bang smack in the middle of that. So an interesting double bottom type of formation here for those who are very, very keen. I would suggest this is probably a higher risk trade just because of it's only got around about 15 pips potentially till it hits some major resistance to the upside. So from a proximity of next key level point of view, just balance that against your own risk profile. Let's have a look at the euro yen. You can see a bounce here, but again, mid-range. This is a common story, of course. Aussie yen, maybe an interesting one to have a look at. You can see again range bound, but we have a clear line in the sand at 96.83. Possible 20 to 25 pips to the upside again before we key resistance. Let's just have a look at the Euro Aussie. No, that's not moving very far at all. Looks really choppy. So very difficult to find an obvious candidate. Um, Perhaps we've got one in the Canadian dollar yen. Look at the daily chart. There's the 200 MA sitting around about this 106.40 level. We've got a resistance which has been a breach of which has failed. You can see two wicks. They've attempted to breach that 107.63. So we could be heading back towards this sort of 106.40 level. Certainly because the Canadian dollar is very responsive to oil prices, the drop in oil has probably helped this to the downside. 107.22 looks like an interesting level. In terms of a key level to the downside, possibly 106.94. So around about 30 pips. Make that my chart of the day in terms of keeping something on your radar. Right, okay, let's move on to the ASX. Let's just check out a few that we've been keeping an eye on the last few days. We just need to quickly change accounts on this. So if we just pop this like the kind of template on this. So you can see we sort of had that earnings bump at the start of the week, but it really hasn't pushed through that at all. So we could be up for a short-term gap fill. Um, Down back to around about 487. Logically, you would wait for a breach of this candle to the downside. It doesn't look as though it's going to do that today, but certainly doesn't appear to be an appetite to move upwards in today's trading. So probably want to review early next week. Those are the two key levels I'll be keeping an eye on around about 560 and 5, and let's say $6 to the upside. 360 ASX on another tear. You can see there, this is stuff we've talked about lots. We have that retracement, but looks as though we're shaping up for a potential move through 46.78 is the level to watch out for. That was previous highs. We had multiple attempts last week, and we might find ourselves retesting that today. That's an outperformance without a doubt. Australian agricultural company in the livestock, the cattle farming space. Again, a really interesting move today, up through this 145 resistance. I think this looks a bit noisy, so the best I think we can hope for is around about a 2.5 to 3% move up towards 150 in the short term. That would be a level. There's just a lot of noise there, so it might prove to be a pause level, perhaps. Let's just. Vulcan Energy on a little bit of a spike today. Up in excess of 6%. That's a difficult one to call. Let me just. So $4 looks like a key level, but again, you're sort of struggling to. It's about 5% up to 420, but you can see this commonly moves. If we look at the ATR, it sort of commonly moves fairly significantly. Many of the candles are $5 to $6 worth. So that would be not a massive move in the context of this stock. But interesting anyway, the higher probability trade is possibly a breach of 430, which may see us move back towards this 480 level. Zip, we've been banging on about more than all week. This has been our chart of the day on a few occasions. More buying today, trend continuation on this stock. We've got 488 marked on the chart. This is based on, if we look at the monthly chart, So this is based on possibly a next level of interest at around about that four. That I would say $5 is probably a good place to put this, just simply because it's a nice round number. So the potential for a move up to that looks on. Certainly the buying pressure's there for all to see today. It's been a very good week, considering we had that retracement early part of the on Tuesday and Wednesday. But this stock just keeps on moving up. This has been a chart of the day here, here, and also, of course, here. So looking very strong for that potential 10 to 12% move up in the medium term, possibly towards about $5. Again, one worth keeping on your radar. Um, it's going to be hard to beat that, to be honest. Obviously, gold stocks are doing well. We can see our Regis Resources looking interesting again, possible. There's a 10% move up to the next resistance if we over this $5 and change. Let's say $5.10 in the last hour. We may see it precipitate some more buying into the close. NXT, we've also another stock we've been watching. This is still stuck in between um, these fairly tight range that it's been in for most of the week. It's retesting that today. So I would keep that on your radar. And the other one I wanted to just check out because we haven't had a look at it today, and it's been another favorite along with Zip for the last few weeks has been Linus. Has pulled back today, around about 170. So yeah, let's just see how that sits on Monday. I think is probably the way to go. So two charts of the day. NXT. See where it sits in the last hour, and of course Zip. Again, make sure there's no end of week pullback towards the back end of the session, and just check in on it later on. Into the US, we obviously saw some buying back into tech. Looks as though Nvidia is supported now at 170. But as yet, there isn't the buying pressure to move it back up to 182. A couple of interesting moves. If we look at Micron, very positive move last night. You can see that this candle here, but didn't actually. No, this is extended out. Did they report last night? It looks as though they possibly have. If that's extended hours trading. No, 124.21. So it's pretty flat in terms of where it finished. Just make sure we've got all the data there. We go. That looks slightly better. So 128 is probably the level to look at on Micron. Microsoft, I also like. I put up this chart earlier. Uh, really tight range. Um, institutions may be accumulating in this place here above 500 to around about 513. Move through this, could see us back up near the 530s. That's a record high there of 555, just for reference. Okay, well, that should probably do it for today. I will give you, I think Microsoft is worth keeping an eye on. Actually, let's just check in on, because we did talk about it the other day, is PHM. Boom. So this was a chart of the day earlier in the week, which suggested if it breached this level, which it did on Wednesday, then this would be of interest, 132.40. If you like the ETF play, XHB is the home builders ETF. That's a little bit of an interesting move up for this as well, retesting this high and this high. So again, resistance formed 117. Probably leave that alone until a breach of that. Maybe a 3% move up, possibly to this level. Medium term, we may see it move up to here, 125, possibly. So there you go. So look, PulteGroup just looked right. So in the home builder space, I did like this space in light of. I think the jobs data has probably made last night's probably made chances of a rate cut more likely again. But that ADP is the deal breaker. And of course, that'll be out before US market opens tonight. So if you are up and around or want to check in first thing in the morning, then it'll all be there in all its glory. So PHM and Nvidia, if we get some more buying coming back into tech as well, both look interesting. So it's Friday, so I wish you all a great rest of day and obviously have a wonderful weekend. We'll catch you back here on Monday. And of course, keep your eyes peeled just in case there is an on-farm payroll session tonight. It'd be great to see you there if you can make it along. Otherwise, enjoy, trade safe. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye for now. Thanks, Roger and Wayne and Johnny and everyone who said hi in the questions box. It's so appreciated. Lots of great comments there. If you wouldn't mind smashing a like on the way out, that would be wonderful. If you haven't done that already, I know many of you have, so that's great. We'll see you later. Bye.